I'm Turb, and I'm a recovering narcissist. I say recovering to save face. You see, I'm still very much toxically self-indulgent, but from an outwards perspective, I need you to sympathize with me in order for manipulation to occur. Therefore, recovering gives me some merit, as I can hide behind the guise of perceived internal cognizance. Narcissism wasn't something inherently ingrained into me from birth. No, it was more of a shield, a survival mechanism, like farming sunflowers and Plants vs. Zombies, but instead of sun points, I have cool pink hair that makes you go, wow. That's a gender-defying queen. You see, when you get called a gorilla enough compared to dirt on a nigh daily basis, have to go through the trouble of educating every white person you've ever met about the politics surrounding the N-word. No, Kyle, you are not a hot. You start to build a barrier of self-perception that allows you to live in a fantasy where you reign supreme. AKA, I cannot be humbled because I am black and the children of chalk around me perceive life differently than I do. The permeation of my virginity regarding social normative inhabitants, which caused my first mental conjuration of this narcissistic sense of self, was probably in grade 5, when upon transferring to my new elementary school, my teacher instinctively put me in an ESL class and dropped me to the reading level D. And for those of you who are not aware, the Canadian reading level system goes from A to Z, meaning I was on level 4 reading The Rainbow Fish with first graders. Now, I can't really say that I learned that this was racism because no one ever taught me the meaning of the word and the social implications it brought forth. But immediately following that day, I understood that featureism regarding the perception of blackness was a detriment towards me. I understood that in order to stay sane, I couldn't rely on outside perception. I had to have my own reinforced internalizations of self. Cause why am I reading the Bubble Guppies with 5-year-old kids? I mean, this was the same dude reading through thesauruses for fun. I read so much of Lemony Snicket's series of unfortunate events, I was calling myself Turb Baudelaire. No kidding, I could read the first 5 pages of a Geronimo Stilton book and tell you what was going to happen in depth. I was basically Hemingway mixed with a little bit of Charles Dickens, except I was better because I was black and my last name wasn't. No offense to, as a narcissistic byproduct of internalized fetishization, I actually really enjoy mine. I just wouldn't want that to be my last name. As I reclused into this headspace again and again, I started to relate to figures that were also trapped in the same struggle as me. The individuals who were trapped in white spaces, like Kobe in Italy, but still managed to prevail as a black person. I mean, the amount of self-determination in tandem with the work ethic philosophy made this image of black success seem reachable. I mean, what was different from me and Kobe? He probably had that same image of narcissistic self-perception until he was great. Fake it till you make it. But what is black excellence really? Like, I wonder. I mean, I never attained it. I've only fantasized about it in my little made-up imaginary world. What struggles did Kobe face? What did he have to go through? Kobe, why are you my symbol of excellence?
There's a quote from one of my English teachers at Lower Marion named Mr. He had a great quote that said, "Rest at the end, not in the middle." And that's something I always live by.
Now you may be thinking, how does a parody character like A-Train capture this figure of black excellence? The Boys is literally just a show about borderline demigods bending the world to their will while corporations fuck up the vibes. A-Train runs around like a frat boy that just did 4 lines of something questionable and is now trying to hit on your whole entire friend group. Well, my answer to that is the internalization of black excellence has its nuances. Everyone's experiences are their own, but the homogenized takeaway from this train of thought is hope. Hope that we can rise above everything around us and become something more than our surroundings. Hope that the insurmountable amounts of poverty and disenfranchisement can be subverted with individualistic progress. Hope that you could be an idol in the black community. A Rihanna, an Obama, a Kobe, a Tiger Woods, a Michael Jackson, a Kendrick Lamar. The list goes on and on and on. Wait, no, actually the list isn't even that long at all. Excellence is by definition an exclusionary term after all. But nevertheless, the story of A-Train is the story of black excellence. He wants the money, a star position on the team, the popularity, the appeal to the community he left behind after reaching his perceived epitome of success. It's what intrinsically fuels his character and guides his character development. He also runs over this guy's girlfriend. That's funny. That white boy didn't even know what to do with all that. I'm not even mad. Today we'll be going through the internalized experience of excellence in the black community, both the splendors and the pitfalls. Now y'all, we as a community make the black experience cool as f, and even more so, our figures of black excellence help champion this view to the public. Yes, Kobe Bryant does make the glitz and glamour of being a black icon enthralling and captivating, but at the end of the day, this notion of black excellence has its downfalls. The character of A-Train is an embodiment of the tribulations intertwined with the trophying of black excellence, because as enthralling as excellence is, for the majority of disenfranchised, poverty-stricken black youth like me, when one fails to encapsulate the image of black excellence with no social or financial safety net to fall back on, this could mean being another victim to the cycle of poverty. For black intellectuals, the failure quotas pertaining to black excellence could mean scrutiny from friends and family pertaining to educational degrees due to intoxicating elitist trains of thought. For athletes like A-Train who've encapsulated black excellence in the same way real-life figures like Kobe Bryant have, this failure to grasp exceptionalism could mean no scholarships, no post-secondary offers, and sadly a loss of support from the community who once championed you. Because Black excellence is a subjective term in cohesion with the perspectives of the Black community, and as we know, Black people as a whole are disenfranchised due to historical oppression, which has led to harsher social and economic landscapes for us to navigate. There's a capitalistic rhetoric of success attached with this image. Excellence in the capitalistic sense of monetary gain, fame, and approval is already so hard to obtain in comparison to our white counterparts. Being Black just adds another layer to the hardships that you're going to face. There are so many statistics that we as Black people are literally expected to beat from birth because of the individualistic rhetoric that capitalism perpetuates. You have to pull yourself up from your bootstraps because everyone's done it, right? The problem with this mindset is that we're running a race that wasn't set up for us. We're 10 miles behind, and if we don't win this race and succumb to the obstacles before us, we're gangsters, we're thugs, we're no-gooders. And if we do win this race, then we're championed and tokenized as a figure of success that every Black person should attain. It's a double-edged dagger that leads us nowhere. Black excellence in itself is a lovely imaginative thought that makes it easy and justifiable to dream about circumstances outside of the boxes we're socially accustomed
when
to.
you're growing up and you're seeing Michael Jordan, it's almost like a god.
You know, we all want to be successful. You know, we all have the same fears of failure. We all have feelings of abandonment. We all, you know, want love.
Whereas the challenges we face with peers, education, and a lack of generational wealth subvert this notion and make it hard to even dream about a life outside of our perceived realities. And the reality is, most Black people that dream about achieving the standard of excellence will never reach it. That's the sad truth.
We're not interested in interracial housing. We don't want your neighborhood. We want ours to be just as good.
You claim you love America. Well, we love America. But you are driving us back and you are making a Samson out of us, and we are going to pull down the pillar. Should you try to pretend that I'm crazy?
A-Train is a story about Black excellence told extremely well. And this is rare, so I wanted to get into it. Because even when he reached these heights of success, it was never enough. Individually, he was lucky enough to be a good enough superhero to escape his poverty-stricken past. But even then, he still feels pressure from his status as a symbol in the Black community. He still has to act within the bounds of white supremacy. He still has to act within the bounds of white comfort. But while acting in the bounds of white comfort, he still has internal and external pressure to serve the community that he derives from. But he's one of the lucky ones, right? He's successful, right? But what does success and what does failure really entail? Before I start this video, I want to say that I have a Patreon. If you're enjoying these monthly videos and you want to support me, my Patreon is in my bio. On my Patreon, I have 13 different 10-minute videos that I've since deleted, but they're still kind of quality. And I have one 15-minute video collab I did for Spear, fully up there. If you sub, you basically get 14 videos, shoutouts and videos, and all of that for like $3. It's like Netflix, but you're supporting a pink hair cutie and not a capitalistic monolith. Thank you to my Patreon subs who have subbed. Thank you. You make my life better. Anyways, back to the video. That was some bad bitch. The phenomenon of Black excellence is one that has many nuances that I'll be going through in a series of acts. I'll be utilizing A-Train, myself, and my collaborators' conversations as a mirror for introspective thought into this conundrum of an idea pertaining to the expectations and limitations that come with it. Whether it be the glitz and glamour of being Black and excellent, or the perilous downfall of failure regarding not encapsulating this vision of excellence. Let's start the video. This is so different without a TV. I can't be throwing no animals around at the TV to start the video. Act 1, A-Train. Expectations. A strong belief that something will happen or be the case in the future. In comparison to the 7, A-Train always stands out. Look at him. He looks like he's single-handedly funding his barber's business. His fade is never lacking. And he pulls off the haircut every little boy envisions themselves rocking in grade 2. He got the trademark speedster goggles that look like you just got them out of a Happy Meal toy. They blue. Cool as fuck. Very masculine. We love that. We hate Wally West. The Flash peaked in season 2. Why does Cisco know everything? He even has an impermeable secret identity. Reddit will never dox him. I mean, try searching up A-Train on Google. You'll never find him. It's impossible. The only thing another member has on him is a fish fetish. Shout out to the peak. The peak. Or maybe he stands out because he's the only visible Black guy. Well, actually, yeah, you're so right. That felt a little racist, but like, you're so right. A-Train stands out purposefully. By design, he's an embodiment of Black swagger. More specifically, however, A-Train is a caricature of tokenized culture, commodified into an image of success that Vought sells as an image of grandeur. Psst. Vought is the company that owns him. Outside of the world of the boys, in black culture, this same thought process is sold to us via the athletes we champion. I mean, it goes without saying that black culture is heavily ingrained in sports. You see this with the championing of zero to hero stories like LeBron James and Usain Bolt. The image of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and becoming more than the oppression around you, which is a flawed idea, but we'll get more into that in Act 2. A-Train is literally a parody of this zero to hero trope. The pressures, the expectations, etc. He is literally a fastest kid in grade 2 class metaphor verbatim. Basically, if you're the fastest kid in the class, you're in a position of perceived excellence. You're amazing. You can do great things. You can bully people. You can ruin interracial relationships and have a domination fetish while still being a pinnacle of excellence. Just like me in grade 2. Yes, Donovan, I did kiss Cassandra by the swings. And Miss Susan? I'm 21 now, no one has to know. Anyways, A-Train being raised in a poverty-stricken neighborhood has been subjected to the horrors that the white public will only read about on rap TV. Because of this, A-Train uses his company-given superpowers. All the superheroes and the boys are injected with this little thingy, blue thingy that gives them superpowers and makes them super strong to enter into the superhero world and pursue black excellence by making a name for himself via becoming a corporate slave. Doesn't that sound a little relatable? Selling your talents by devoting your life to reaching corporate glamour is a hypocrisy of black excellence that we don't talk about enough. Essentially, we as black people dream about infiltrating white spaces of corporate servitude without knowing what it entails. Excellence is exclusionary by definition, meaning a very small number of us have achieved such high position of perceived prominence. Thus, when we enter these spaces, it's for and not built for us. Heading into these situations with expectations of grandeur without knowing that the higher and higher we go into the echelons of economic success, the less and less black people will see, becoming a token of a token of a token. When A-Train reached his position of perceived excellence, sure, he was happy. Sure, he was getting the woman. Sure, he had the love and admiration he yearned for his whole entire life, but at the cost of adhering to white standards and becoming a puppet. These companies could care less about your morals, ethics, and culture unless they're benefiting off it economically. The same way I won't fund my little sister's lemonade stand pyramid scheme if she doesn't give me a 40% profit. Child labor is so extortable and very niche micro-internet celebrity of me. Basically, A-Train fell into the shut up and dribble policy. Being black in a place of prominence means complacency and expectations. Enforce tolerance via your economic well-being towards the whim of a system of supremacy, reinforced as professionalism that dictates how you should dress, what hairstyle you should come in with, and how you should sound around your peers, sapping your life away for someone that's only using you for diversity reasons. Positions of prominence are still taken by the white majority. As hard as it is to get to this position of power as a black individual, it's now 10 times harder just to keep your job. A-Train felt this via subserviency to the hegemonic melanin-deficient power system around him, having to adhere to the standards, expectations, and criteria of the white individuals in higher positions of prominence. I mean, he had to bend to Homelander's whim time and time and time again. This internally made A-Train feel an inherent disconnection with his blackness, as the mindset of corporate slavery leads to individualism being championed more than community. But can you blame him? The glitz and glamour of black excellence is enamoring. Being able to have financial freedom, a comparable fraction of the power his white peers around him had, plus a third-grade haircut of perceived superiority. I can't get over that fade. Just like a true coon, he probably got into a battle with a coyote and lost. In pursuit of power, A-Train lost his sense of community the way a lot of these corporate coons do. You can see this as he slowly succumbs to the mental trauma of his cultural loss through his performative overcompensation, trying to rekindle a sense of belonging in the black community by feeding into a homogenized view of black culture. He copes with his sense of loss by retouching with his African roots via planning an African safari game.
With a docuseries on Lost Soul. A-Train to Africa. Yeah, I want to get back in touch with my roots. And for the Gen Zs, a state-of-the-art interactive learning experience. Is that a video game about the slave trade? Some powerful stuff.
And customizing his suit in the most performative way possible. Respectfully, don't do this. If you step out in a daishiki, us Africans will look at you like you tie-dyed your shirt. I'm from Sudan, the motherland. You can trust me. For the crackers out there, performative activism can take place with black people too. Rather than going back to his community, pouring resources into it, and strengthening these disenfranchised people as a whole, he decides, okay, I've reached a level of power where I'm an icon. And since blackness in the corporate world is ambiguous, I can be a symbol of hope for all black people. The The Jay-Z method, essentially.
Before was the American dream. Pull yourself out of bootstraps and you can make it in America. All these lies that America told us our whole life. And then when we start getting it, they try to lock us out of it. They start inventing words like, capitalist and, things like that. I mean, we've been called monkeys. I don't care. Those words y'all come up with, y'all got to come up with stronger words.
Get big and tell people to just work in order to become the same icon of success that you are. But what can we expect for someone that champions personal accolades over his community? So much so, when confronted with a way to help his community via calling out a racist officer, over patrolling his old neighborhood and literally lynching his communal members, decides to feign ignorance to the same systems of oppression he is perceivably actively trying to improve. As a community, we don't have the same societal powers that the vanilla villains do. Therefore, black community is all a lot of us can rely on to fall back to. White people have the comfort of being the societal norm, the power balance that dictates social cognizance. A-Train, failing to realize this, thinks he could change systemic racism from the inside out. Spoiler warning, despite what Bridgerton tries to tell you with its black queen, you can't do this. You can't do this. Race does not work like that. It does not work equally. The most a corporate coon in a position of power can hope for is being a figure of excellence that will ultimately rely on the power structure of systemic racism to fuel their public, financial, and social viability. They cannot rely on their community because they are above their community now, but not high enough to be free from the same structures that limit them. And A-Train felt this. Once he disconnected from his community, he couldn't rely on it anymore. He learns this the hard way when, during a staged protest against this cop, acting as a perceived mitigator, he brings in the same said lyncher to try to realize his wrongs. A-Train, being the Oreo he is, naturally naively believes that the cop, when confronted by black people, the same people that have been over-policed, oppressed, and subjected to racial discrimination, will in turn forgive him. Like, yeah, Paul Blart, you killed a black person, and I can only recall like 20 black people that you racially profiled from Eyewitness, so we'll just forgive you if you say sorry. We'll let you off the hook. We're a sundown town. Yeah. If it wasn't clear already, at this point we know how disconnected A-Train is from his community. The mental gymnastics of white apologists never cease to amaze me. Simone Biles levels of mental contortions, to be frank. Why would this community show sympathy and educate the offer on his wrongs? Being the victims of institutional racism will obviously lead to a little resentment. Just a little bit. And on top of that, having to be the repairers of said connections when they're only reacting to the said material conditions of their surroundings is quite odd, to say the least. None of these people asked to be lynched or over-policed in the streets, mind you. But A-Train, being the disconnected coon that he is, thinks the same officer will listen and apologize for his actions. And another fail. But 3 strikes and you're out, right, guys? Yeah, the third strike being his brother permanently crippled and almost dying, mind you. I love Wii baseball. It's so fun. During this protest, the community, as any that's been oppressed for extended periods of time, rebel in the face of its perpetrator of violence, while the cop fires back all lives matter rhetoric, escalates the situation, and cripples A-Train's brother for life. No matter how high of a position of power you think you are as a black person, you are still a nigga. A nigger, to be exact. And the same systems of racism will still affect you and your community, no matter how much you bask in the glory of your perceived individualistic merit. When it's time to address black issues, you are treated as a black person. I feel like A-Train finally realizes this while seeing his brother in a wheelchair. He finally knows that the only thing that gives him power is white supremacy. Meaning the same force that crippled his brother is the same force that gave him his status of power. Initially, he decides to side with the company's beliefs rather than stand against the systemic bigotry that he's faced with. But after the scuffle, he faces the perpetrator of these said racial targetings and runs him across the damn pavement, as he should. Satisfying as hell. All cops are bastards. Treat them like Mussolini, baby. String them up to the gas station. String them up to the gas station. Systems of power cannot be changed from the inside out. The imbalance of power between the black and white communities have and will always exist as long as systemic racism is a factor in the Western world. Black excellence is a facade which works to give us a false sense of hope for the future, but we're missing very important nuance. A-Train was once in the same system of disenfranchisement. What hurdles did he have to overcome in order to be excellent? What changed him? What changes us? And what does being black and excellent really entail.
Act 2. The Conundrum of Black Excellence.
The juice, the sauce, the exaggerated
swagger of a black teen. It gives me goosebumps every time he does it.
Call it what you want, but it's just how it sounds. Black excellence. The ability to encapsulate the charismatic image of success, assurance, and self-confidence that black culture has curated in all its splendor. Now for context, I come from a family of African immigrants who've escaped South Sudan following a bloody civil war, which claimed the lives of millions. However, we had hope. Hope that somewhere out there, black people like us could succeed and flourish with the help of a stable environment around us. Thus began my family's search for black excellence. This same search of black excellence brought us to Canada. And yes, the black community here isn't as prevalent as it is in the United States, but nevertheless, my parents coming from war-torn Africa, one being a child soldier and the other being a 20-year-old mother who's known nothing but begging in the streets littered with carcasses, followed this image of black excellence by gambling their past lives in a hope for a promising future. And along this journey, there was little me, Turb, aged 2 years old, born out of a refugee camp in Cairo. I mean, we were so poor that in the camp, my mom sold my baby photos. And now I don't even know what I look like as a child. Throughout my life, I've internalized the same image of black excellence that almost everyone in my community aspires to reach. Something beyond me, something more. However, my first memory of awe in tandem with this image of black excellence was with a superstar named Kobe Bryant. I was sitting with my dad watching the Raptors go against the Lakers. Swoosh! He makes the three. My dad smiles and looks at me. Good shooter, yes? He says in my mother tongue. And I look back at him, internalizing this admiration. I didn't know it yet, but Kobe Bryant's talent was something I wanted my dad to see in me too. Swish! He makes another swish, three. Another one. Swish! Another one. At the end of the game, he finished with 81 points. 81 points. A Herculean feat that only one player ever had been able to surpass around 40 years prior. At the end, I tell my dad, I want to be just like him. I can be just like him too, right? He laughs and tells me, Thea, you can be better than him. I promise. And then he walks me into my room. My stomach was rumbling, and it was around the third day I didn't have dinner. But as he pulled up the blanket and tucked me in, he promised that the future was bright if I just worked hard enough. Besides the crippling poverty that surrounded me, I believed him. It was such a breath of fresh air to even begin to think that I could escape the conditions that I was in, and thus began my internalization of black excellence.
As happy as a story as that may seem, of an immigrant child moving to a perceivably better country in hopes of grasping a dream that would have otherwise been unattainable in his prior war-torn country. Yeah, it turns out the story doesn't get any better, and everyone lied to me and I need monetary compensation for this facade. I'm not kidding. If I find a senator, I will. Uncle Fix said I'm not allowed to say this because of FBI reasons, so that's redacted for now. Basically, the story of the Western dream is a lie. A capitalistic myth of near impossibility, perpetuated by white people who already have established money, foundations, and social normalcy in Western society. Utilizing their privilege, they spew stories of grandeur, specifically the "you could have this too" rhetoric, and feigning ignorance to the privilege they've already achieved and cemented in society, something that the majority of black people do not have. The same money, social status, and well-being we depict as success most of the time is just normalcy for white people. Metaphorically, let's say the goal of your life is trying to have a stable life from nothing. This is actually kind of applicable because I guess this is a Western view of society. Okay, try building a stable life now. Oh, you don't have a house, right? Okay, I'll give it to you under the conditions you live in a crumbling townhouse in a community surrounded by drug abuse. Oh, plus you're in crippling poverty because to get here you had to get tens of thousands of dollars in debt that continues to go up every year. Oh, plus we put 10 police officers in regular patrol around your neighborhood that continually racially profile you. Oh, plus you don't even know how to talk to me. You don't know any English. But on the bright side, once in a while there'll be an ice cream truck that comes around with Sonic Gumball Eyes ice cream. By the way, your kid got shot by an officer the other day because he looked like life's difficulty is set with your skin tone. And my nigga, I'm on extra hard. That sounded weird. I am no stranger to these experiences of being extra hard. Remember my story. My family came here as immigrants when I was very young, not knowing any English with $0 in our pocket. In fact, we were in the negatives. The Western dream of excellence has in essence brainwashed and destroyed my family, and all of my cousins' families who've also immigrated here on that promise. I'm begging you to understand that in a traditional sense of academia and hard work, very few people make it out of this system of poverty. This is real life for a lot of us. I can only account for like 3 out of 200 immigrant kids that actually made this idea of black excellence into reality. Even by definition, as educated as I am, as big as a platform as I have, as perceivably successful as I become, as cute as fuck as I am, yeah. I'm not even a part of this success story yet, and I haven't even graduated yet. Meaning, under the perfectionist image of capitalistic success, a lot of us suffer because we can't attain it. It's sad that I can only account for 3 people out of the mass amount of my family members that left our war-torn country just to see a better life, while on top of this being continually gaslit by communal members and societal standards into believing that our failure was our fault, while we cope by doing drugs, drinking alcohol, doing anything under the sun just to keep the thoughts of perceived inadequacy at bay. But put yourself in our shoes. Who can we blame but ourselves when social norms tell us we're not enough? Black excellence to me was always this thing of like, you left your country and now you can have more, which played a role in my life, heavy role in my life, heavy role in my family dynamic, basically impacted everything I did to get out of this perceived system. That was our method of trying to overcome our situations, overcome the obstacles before us. It's toxic, to say the least. The main draw away from that was like hope, and I can't blame my parents for that. You know, like I can't blame my parents for like hoping, buying into this dream that like the Western world sells. If you come here, you can do X, X, and X. How that's reverberated in my life was basically expectations of like, okay, now you have to do this. Because we did all of this, and because our life was so much harder, going to university isn't going to be hard for you.
Right. You're our investment, so you better go to where we go.
Getting a house by the time you're 20 is like, shouldn't be that hard. Like all of these things shouldn't be that hard because our life was substantially more harder, which it was. They come from a war-torn country, so it was. But they also disregard the impacts of the Western world, spears of racism, because coming here from Africa, we don't really know a lot of things about racism and about like decolonizing our thought process and stuff, and just not having a prominent Black community here also added to that.
You know, our parents wanting us to do it a certain way because that's basically the method that kind of worked for them. My parents came from Nigeria, so I'm also a first-gen Nigerian. And what I constantly think about with like our dynamics with our parents as first gens, right? You know, particularly my dad, right? My dad is, you know, at this age, he's upper middle class, right? He, as far as he's considered, he won the game, right? To him, America does work because he came from a place where he was severely under-resourced and underdeveloped. Even though it is a sham, right? He did the work that he had to do. And he's like, well, you know, my dream was to have a house and a kid and a Beamer. So I don't see what you guys are talking about where you guys think this is too hard or you guys think this is unfair because, I mean, I'm alive and I'm now happy-ish with my life. Why are you guys complaining? I think that what's very important to talk about is how trauma informs memory. I think the difference between my parents and myself are that because of the work they had to do to win America's game, they have a very stoic, a very like pragmatic view to life that doesn't necessarily, through no fault of their own, right? Because like they're just trying to get through the world. This is what works for them, saying like, this is America. You can't expect any favors. No one should be getting any handouts. You just, if you work hard enough, if you kill yourself hard enough and you don't actually die, then you'll reap the rewards that they're talking about. Whereas because they did that for me, I'm able to move through the world with slightly more, like you said before, like hope, almost the same hope they had coming to the country, but hope that like our lives could be better with less work. You know, the conversation we have, I'm kind of always talking about empathy. I'm always talking about trying to see the better sides of like the thems when we're talking about the us's. And my parents are like, why would you do that? Because every time for them that's happened, they've been taken advantage. When they've come to the country, the first thing they did was try to be nice to the people in power, try to be nice to white people. And then my dad wasn't able to be hired for the first like 5 years that he was in this country simply because of his name. And then when he changed his name for a resume, they saw him, heard his accent, they sent him right back out. Though that stuff I didn't know when I was like in high school, but now that I think about that, it really does inform what their exact definition of Black excellence is and how you get to it and its purpose. Because for them, there is a method to the madness and they're always fighting both with the method and with the madness. The madness being like this idea that like America is this land of opportunity in which like if you just pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you're able to succeed, while also realizing that the methods of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, one, is not possible, and two, is painful, very almost puritanical in its process. I think that's why a lot of Africans, East and West, that come to the country end up doing so well, because like this idea of pain for profit or pain for some sort of everlasting salvation kind of already jives with our spiritual ethos. So they're like, no, this makes sense, you know, like, you know, I work hard and then God's gonna reward me. And so I had my children and I want my children to be seen benevolent in like God's eyes or in the world's eyes. So I want to make sure I put them in the best possible situation in order to do that. And the situation that worked out for them is you need to go to college. You need to have a house and you need to have a wife by like 26, 27, because that gives you more time to like build your home, build your property, build your work. Plus, you know, I want grandkids so we can continue to grow our empire. It's a very like traditional way of thinking that is basically based on, hey, if it feels hard, that's good. And when Black excellence is tied to that, it's all that means in no uncertain terms that Black excellence is tied to pain. And I remember growing up, that's honestly how I knew I was doing a good job, or how I was able to reconcile like the emotional turmoil that I was going through, like not being able to go outside, not being able to watch TV during the week, having to immediately come home and do homework. My friends being like, yo, Tayo, why can't you come out? And my parents be like, you can't go out because I don't want you hanging out with XYZ because, you know, I seen their grades, right? It at the time felt like my parents were protecting me, and they were trying to, but they were trying to say, hey, look, here's the path. We came from Nigeria all the way here, and we trotted the path. You doing all this other shit was not in the plan. But what it did in practice, right, was isolated me, and in some ways kept me from maybe a more healthy type of Black excellence, in which I was in more community, just around people that looked like me more. And this kind of goes to what you were talking about before about, you know, the Zendayas and the Jay-Z's. When you pull that 10%, the boy says, right, you isolate. Sure, they're represented and they might have each other, but they're now looking down and they don't understand what it was like to be a regular person of color. They've now got a little star in their chest, and now they're like, oh yeah, you know, like I made it. They go, I worked for this. But really, Black excellence to me, in a lot of ways, it's a constellation prize. It's a marker saying like, hey, we the hegemony, we the main people accept you. It's like getting a little sheriff star and saying like, yeah, you know, you now have a little bit more power than the people that we don't think are Black excellence. Now that I'm in my 20s and out of school, the thing that I think about is like, what did all those years of being told that I am the special Black one, that I am the model minority do for me actually? Like getting good grades, going to a good school. I still came out of school with debt. I still like I don't feel like Black excellence. But like when my parents talk about me to their friends, like they're like, oh, their son's a CPA and he got 2 degrees. And he had a full-time job rather than a part-time job. Like, I think there's definitely a generational war happening right now between like what we should feel towards Black excellence, because Black excellence feels double-edged second place trophy. Whereas like, I do good work, but I don't like that you're saying I do good work in spite of being Black. And I don't like the competition that it sows. Once we start all vying for Black excellence instead of Black solidarity, instead of Black community, we end up kind of stratifying ourselves in the same way that the white capitalist patriarchy does us.
That kind of brought a lot of talking points that I didn't even think about. We're both first generation immigrants, but I'm probably on the other end of the spectrum in terms of like, I was a very radical kid. I was still gifted, I guess, in a white sense of like academia, but like grade 12, a bunch of stuff happened. I started like missing classes more just because of familial trauma. No one in my lineage has really gone to university, so like even applying to university was very hard for me to do. So I ended up othering myself and trying to fit into like this position of excellence, the same way like my parents sold the dream to me, the same way my teachers sold the dream to me, because that was the only pathway that I saw. So I went to university, did poli-sci. Second year, I decided I don't even want to do this shit. I want to do content creation. You know, like my mom was furious. Like my mom was like, just because I didn't fit that idea of Black excellence that she always envisioned when we moved here. And she was like, okay, either you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to be a doctor. I'm good at chemistry. I fucking suck at math. I'm not going to go into sciences. So writing is my best option. So I was like, okay, I'm going to be a lawyer. I go into that. I do well in everything, but it doesn't satisfy me to the point where like I want to do this further. So Black excellence to me.
Wait, hold on. Can I say something about the lawyer thing for a second? Yeah. It brought up another really important thing that I think about, because once I don't know if you went to a PWI or not, or if they have HBCUs.
I went to a PW. Everything there's no such thing as a PWI or a HBCU. It's literally white people. So
okay, yeah, I thought so. I grew up in Baltimore, which is on the East Coast in America. It's very Black. There are sections of it that are very impoverished, and that influenced my childhood because that's where I went to school for all my public education. When I met white people finally in college, and I met their parents and how they talk to their kids, the thing that makes me feel so sad sometimes, I'll put it like this, is that you're good at writing, and your mom probably understood you were good at writing, and because of that shared thing, you ended up saying, okay, I'm gonna be a lawyer, because your mom was like, doctor, lawyer, or what's the third one? Accounting, fine.
Yeah, accountant, right? Nurse, like things like high paying
because
jobs.
Like, and I think about this all the time, because that path is already trodden. All adults understand that like once you get out into the real world, because of the capitalist system that we live in, the only thing that matters is that someone pays you to do something. When I was in school, I thought like all the stuff it was teaching me was like more like the factory maker model. The stuff that I'm learning in accounting is going to be directly applicable to the stuff that I'm going to be doing in the workplace. Or if I get poli-sci, you're learning how to be a senator or something consumption. No, you're getting general knowledge, basically. You're learning about stuff in the industry, but once you get out, no one really asks you about your GPA. No one really cares what you did in school. Like, it's, can you sell yourself? Can you do something and get someone else to pay you for it? That is a hot take, but that's a thing that white people have access to because of their experience that I find when I talked about their immigrant friends, we don't have. Our parents don't have that basis. That's what my white friends' parents did. They saw their kid was good at something. It was like, well, if I get this kid really, really good at that thing they're already doing that they seem to like, they're going to make money anyway. And that's the thing that we all found out. You know, we're like, I'm disillusioned by work. We started writing. We started making YouTube videos. And then we're like, oh, wait, people will pay me on Patreon for this? I might be able to like pay a gas bill, pay a rent check off of this. And sometimes I do think now that I'm more committed to it, imagine if I was like Emma Chamberlain. Yeah. Like, imagine if like I started like 16 and like I knew that, yeah, you know, people just pay people for stuff. I don't have to do like a job. Like, we'd be in a totally different place. But it makes sense why I was taught that. Because our parents were like, I'm going to spend this money, make you get this loan to ensure that you have a thing that people will pay you for. Because the only reason why we're in this country anyway is because there's supposed to be opportunities to make money. And that's another thing I think to Black excellence, right? It's this, we act like it's excellence, but it's really just like a railroad system. It's another hierarchy to say like, hey, look, we have a couple more guides, couple more routes if you guys want to go through. But that's really only what Black excellence is. You have to be super successful, super hungry in business, right? Jay-Z would not be considered the mastermind he is if he wasn't as exploitative, if he didn't like figure out how to get all of us on fucking Hennessy. If he wasn't so capitalistic, he would not be considered Black excellence, even though he's still a great musician. But he's excellent because he subscribed and succeeded at what we would call it like finessing, but like finessing is literally taking.
And I feel like there's also an othering with like I don't know if you felt this, but with like immigrants specifically with like Black culture, where it's like we come here, we're like, okay, we're different from these Black people, so there's like routes that we have to take, and creativity is just not a route that's available for us. You know? Like you said, we feed into the white hegemonic model of like, okay, we have to do X, X, and X. And yeah, it is very much more trauma induced of like, okay, they had to work this hard. And if they come here and feed into like the same spears of racism without knowing what Black community is initially, then they're going to put that same racism on the Black community, which is like what my mom did with like a lot of my friends, like you said. Have you noticed like when you go into like these spaces of like perceived excellence, the less and less Black people you'll see? Like the statistics you have to beat just to get into uni, you know, at a PWI are so fucking staggering. When I went up higher and higher and higher into the echelons to perceived excellence, less and less Black people I saw. Of course, university being as big as it is was the biggest Black community that I was accustomed to, but per population, like once I really thought about it, I was like, there's not that much of us. There's not that much of us. What's crazy is that we think that is a signifier of our excellence and not a signifier of resources. Yeah, like as you just said that, it just clicked in my brain. I was like, yeah, I mean, we all know that you're going to see less Black people the higher up you go in excellence, but like I was like, do I even want that now? Yeah, right, dude. Like, would I even rather be in a place where, or now I know, because now like my first job out was one of those like the accounting equivalent of Big Law. I'll be the only Black person in rooms in office sometimes for a week, and it would literally make my head hurt. Like it was giving me a latent anxiety that I hadn't noticed until another Black person came into the room, because it is a little strange to not see anyone that looks like you for a prolonged period of time. Because I feel like when you get into like these spears of like hegemonic white success, there's a tokenism aspect to it, and it becomes a survival mechanism. Like you said, that ingrained anxiety of being the only Black person in the room, where like you have to adjust to the jokes they're talking about. You have to adjust to the professional atmosphere, where it's like I never had locks when I was in university. Only when I left university, I twisted up my hair and I endorsed more on Black culture. But like while I was a token, I never really fed into the image of Black culture. At least I thought I did. In retrospect, when I look back at myself, I'm like, okay, I was Black, but I was in survivability mode. I was in, okay, I need to do this, and this in order to appease the white people around me. Whereas like around Black people, like you said, that anxiety is lifted. That's not what a lot of people understand with like Black excellence either, is there's still spears of disenfranchisement as much as it is social, it's financial, it's everywhere. You can't really escape it when you're in these perceived echelons of white success. You know, it's a losing game to try to aspire to something that was never meant for you. What's difficult is that I was watching a video yesterday or the other day about like people that are like Black famous, right? People that have like done a lot of things in their careers that would make you think that they would have like some sort of critical acclaim or like some sort of visibility in the entirety of a medium, but they're only really known to like Black people. Like I guess like Jackie Harry, the
homegirl that won the Emmy for Abbott Elementary. Not Quinta, but the woman. And that right there is the tension of Black excellence to me, where it's like, who are we acknowledging as Black and excellent? What do they look like? What do they do? And why does there not seem enough space, even though there's plenty of other people that are that speak more towards the community that end up becoming like, oh, you know, Auntie knows who they are, or like if you're in the community, you know who they are, but we're not able to raise them up as much. What I end up seeing in a lot of interviews is like, it just depends on how hungry you are. Like every person that ends up getting to Black excellence, your Ye's, your J's, and even Rihanna, they go through a period where they're like hyper focused on being the best token they can be within that industry in order to be like, okay, I am needed. Then they're not needed, and then they fall off, right? So then it continuously makes me ask, like, what is even the point of aspiring to an excellence that doesn't really want me there in the first place?
You always see people clap when Black people leave their communities, or make those microaggressions like, Jamal made it out of the hood, but no one claps when Timmy makes it out of the suburbs. For that one person you're clapping for, that makes it out of the hood and gets the money, the prominence, the perceived position of power, there's still millions of families in those neighborhoods suffering, or having no dinner for the month because they decided sending their kid to school was a better investment than eating. Why? Because the suburbs is the mission of survival that is extremely difficult for us to achieve. This is just a side note, but I genuinely don't remember a time period in my life where my neighbors weren't cooking crack on the stoves. I've witnessed it from a young age. It's not like Breaking Bad. My husband is not Walter White. Yo. My neighbor just got a jail sentence for selling a 1/4 ounce of weed because his little sister was starving and asking for a meal. Yo. The police are outside questioning kids with assault rifles. Yo. But it's very easy to believe the allure of Black excellence when figures like Kobe, Zendaya, and Beyonce are the cornerstone figures we see on TV every day. Aspire to be, grow up admiring. Even in an academic sense, our teachers, being none the wiser, have always advised us that the easiest way out of disenfranchisement is education, without taking racism, economic stability, or privilege into factor, which actually works to trick Black people into thinking they have the same level of opportunity as our white counterparts, and most of the time plunging us directly into poverty because of the negligence surrounding racism that we're accustomed to. Have any of you guys noticed that the higher and higher you go into education, the less and less Black people you'll see? Let's debunk the education to job excellence pipeline really quick. If y'all don't believe, fuck you, Miss Lessig. Being in a disenfranchised community means you can't select the same schools that a financially well-off family can. This translates to 45% of Black students attending high poverty schools, compared with 8% of white students. This statistic is just one of many that highlight the negligence of privilege that white people have. Western privilege is telling disenfranchised, poverty-stricken people, just go to school and you can obtain the same status I can. Then giving them the bottom of the barrel academic material while keeping the majority of wealth and resources in white educational spaces, which translates into nigh unattainable means of success. Only 9 out of 100 Black students performed at or above the NAEP proficient level in civics. Only 13 of 100 Black students performed at or above the NAEP proficient level in maths. Only 15 out of 100 Black students performed at or above the NAEP proficient level in reading. Through these abysmal education foundations, we are expected to work with and make the best of it, mind you. Because of this train of thought, a lot of Black people tend to even quit on the idea of education or the idea of academia as a whole. 22% of Black 18 to 24-year-olds were neither enrolled nor working. Also, let's not forget that mental health isn't catered to in Black communities. About 37 out of 100 institutionalized Black students dropped out of school. For someone with mental health problems, I felt this the majority of times I was in school. Having teachers tell me that I wasn't trying hard enough and comparing my struggles with theirs. My principal literally pulled me aside in grade 12 and asked me why I wasn't attending classes, and while I sat there silent, she berated me again and again and again with words like, you're lazy, you're not even going through that much, I've struggled more than you have. Keep in mind, this is a white lady and I'm a Black immigrant living in government housing. I hope she watches this video. I hate her. This isn't even to account for the nuances of poverty leading to kids dropping out and having to take care of their families. Poverty leading to gang violence, which tempts Black youth who haven't eaten a meal in days turning to selling drugs just to have something in their stomach. And these are just high school statistics, mind you. Nearly 8 out of 100 Black males dropped out of school, and about 6 out of 100 US-born Black students dropped out of school. Every time you beat a statistic as a Black person, because of Black excellence and societal standards, you're now expected to beat another one. It's like the final boss fight in a video game where you kill him after using 9,000% of your effort, and then he just revives. And then he just revives again. Then he just revives again. And you're expected to beat him. It's an Elden Ring boss. He's sweeping the fucking floor like this. He's sweeping the floor like this. You gotta like jump over that shit. It's crazy. It's crazy. That's to sum it up. Yeah. In 2017 to 18, 13% of black students obtained bachelor's degrees. 13% of black students obtained bachelor degrees in a STEM field. 7% of black students obtained associate degrees. 6% of black students obtained master's degrees. 5% of black students obtained doctor's degrees. The poverty rate is still the highest for black students. A lack of internet access at home has become a barrier for black students to learn. The disproportion between black students and black teachers has not been approved. School dropout rate keeps high among black students. Graduation rates and college enrollment rates remain low among black students.
But solving systemic racism is more than just improving education rates and funding black schools. Life is like a white woman's cookies. You bite into it and you hope there's no raisins, no avocados, or ravioli, or like sardines. I've eaten some of their weird cookies. I'm in a predominantly white area. I know what y'all do. Systemic racism is more intricately woven into the Western world than you think. System. Remember that. It's in the systems, meaning it affects all systems of a black person's life. The myth of working to beat the odds is perpetuated by more than just the educational system, mind you. Meaning the spheres of disenfranchisement are also social and financial. Jobs will be less reluctant to hire you the closer to black proximity that you are. Locks, braids, twists, our names, the color of our skin, and how well we code switch will dictate how professional we look to the white gaze above all else. Banks will give us less on our loans compared to our white counterparts, and will be less forthcoming about selling us houses in white neighborhoods, or any neighborhood. Because of all these factors, we can assume black excellence is basically how close to the model of white comfortability can I get to, packaged in a cute little box of work ethic. For white people, these systems of privilege aren't a detriment towards them, as they are towards black people. Therefore, when we fantasize about reaching these same levels of privilege, the very idea of dreaming about that is flawed, because the systems were not made for us. While we fantasize about reaching these heights, white America sells the rhetoric of work ethic will bring you everything you've wanted, cynically tricking us in order to keep us in these same trains of capitalistic thought. It's why as you go higher and higher into perceived positions of excellence, be it corporate positions of management, education, or higher income areas, it's only natural you see less and less black people. Let's take my story into account again. Whereas a lot of my peers could go home to parents that were already reading to them, interacting with them educationally, could provide with them a means of effective communication, monetize their learning, monetize their education, provide them with 3 squared meals a day, new clothes, maybe a car, maybe a loan on their university funding, funding their sports, funding their daily life. I had none of that. Just to survive in an educational sense, I had to work 10 times harder than my peers by teaching myself English, teaching myself how to study, teaching myself algebra, teaching myself chemistry. Just to survive in my family dynamic, I had to work 10 times harder than my peers by helping my parents do paperwork, helping them navigate the social climate of a new country as one of 2 English speakers in the house at the age of 5 to 16, and being the communicational interpreter for all conversations, as my parents didn't understand English at an adequate enough level. Just to survive in my social life, I had to work 10 times harder than my peers by picking up a job at the age of 15, which is illegal in Canada, by the way. Shout out to don't worry, I censored your company name. I was nice. To pay for my school supplies because my mom refused to buy a calculator that costed $100. Having to pay for my own clothes. Having to pay for my own club team. Having to pay all the transactions on the outings with my friends because my mom wouldn't give me more than $3 for the bus. A lot of the things my peers took for granted, I was fighting for on a day-to-day basis. Yet with all the work I did, it was not enough to escape poverty. I'm still impoverished. So what the fuck is this capitalistic dream of work ethic leading to success? Well, a lot of my peers could just smoke and play video games while reaping the rewards of their privilege by doing nothing. Even if I worked 10 times harder than my peers, it was still not enough. And I'm one of the lucky ones in terms of disenfranchisement. Although I lived in poverty-stricken neighborhoods, they've never been gang-ridden. I'm not as over-policed as other people are in America. I actually had access to an adequate education, even though my post-secondaries were paid out of my pocket. It gets worse than my experience for a lot of black youth. Way worse. Which is why we see black people failing to reach the same economic standards as a white person. We're not working less. In fact, most of the time we're even working harder. My mom worked 3 jobs. Night shift, day shift, afternoon shift, back to back to back. But white negligence due to comfortability allows them to be praised for being in positions of wealth and looking down on disenfranchised, poverty-stricken individuals. When the reality is, you're not better or working any harder than that homeless or poverty-stricken immigrant person that you see at the bus stop. That person has probably seen 9,000 times the economic and social hell that you have. Spitting in their face, picturing them as this image of failure that you don't ever want to be like, dismissing them as drug-ridden junkie is perpetuating capitalistic ideals of elitism. You're no better than them. In fact, you're the problem with society. Being unable to see the lengths of your privilege. I'd akin you to a piece of shit that hasn't faced the same hardship that homeless man has, and then judging him from a pedestal of your parents' money. Because let's question work ethic for a sec. To the average white established individual in society, doing the bare minimum and staying in the position that they are in is way easier than beating the hundreds of statistics a poverty-stricken black person has to face. White people can do 10 times less and be societally rewarded 10 times more. And this is where we delve into white privilege.
Act 3. white privilege and black perception. Black perception of white privilege is something we don't delve into enough. Sure, Emily can say, white privilege exists. ACAB, ICD, NW, MCIK, HIHS, NALAP. But these words ultimately have no weight if Emily doesn't practice intersectionality or find out what privilege means in her life. Now, what we as a black community as a whole don't delve into enough is our internalizations of whiteness in tandem with the black experience. Don't get me wrong, black is very much a culture, but more than that, it's a shared social identity. If you're dark-skinned and you enter America, you're black. Plain and simple. Have fun. If you're a black immigrant, you may perceive the experience of being black as a detriment towards your culture because of anti-black normalcy in the Western world. Therefore, instead of identifying as black, you start to name yourself Dominican, Afro-Latina, Nigerian, American, Canadian, etc. These are personal cultural distinctions. Good for you for having them. But if you're black, sorry, babe. It's all-encompassing. I don't make the rules. Take the underscore curly blasian out of your username. It doesn't make you any more desirable. Let me be the first to burst your bubble of innate superiority in tandem with a clusterfuck of internal bigotry, which has led you to perceive blackness as lesser. You're still black. Black is a social construct, the same way white is. But the Western image of black specifically came from the homogenization of slaves, which means the degradation of character, traits, and anti-black societal normality all centers around this evolution of imposed bleached superiority, which was meant to give white people justifications around having more rights and freedoms than black people. The bigotry has echoed through time on a social level. Have you ever heard of the allegory of the cave? Imagine societally we're all just sitting there looking at the projection, and the fire is just institutional racism shouting the N-word at the top of its lungs. Meaning socially, yeah, some people are going to see that projection and internalize it. Sometimes Socrates has a bit more palpability than being an insecure philosophy major's only topic of conversation. Got y'all. Got y'all. A perceived black immigrant can move into America none the wiser to Western experiences because racism is different than in Africa and actually end up othering themselves, in essence becoming detached from the black community, becoming tokenized and adopting anti-black trains of thought.
What was the age you found out that Africans and black people had beef?
Well, you kind of always know. The realization process is very different, you know. At first, I did not notice it because the Sudanese people around me were a community of Sudanese people. So I didn't even differentiate what blackness was and black and white was. I knew like the white kids were racist to me and everything, but I didn't know like, okay, my parents perceived South Sudanese people differently than other black people until we moved to the South side. And then there was so much more like more culturally ingrained black people that had been here for like more generations, where my parents were like, no, you just can't hang out with them. And I'm like, why? Like you just can't hang out with them. Go see your cousin. You know what I mean? And my cousin was like 5 blocks down. I had to fucking bike 30 minutes. Like I had to bike. So like, yeah, it was jarring. I don't know the exact age when I realized, but like, I feel like my realization process was slower and not like a snap thing because I always did know. More so with my decolonization of thought, trying to relate my intersectionality with blackness and being an immigrant and like trying to feed into black culture because I did not know what black culture was, like listening to rap music, like doing things like that and seeing my parents like distaste with that, you know. Whereas like I kind of slowly figured out like, okay, my parents have a thing against black culture. Whereas they'll play Afro beats, they'll play African music, they'll do things like that in the house. Even gospel music in the house. They'll never play a rap song. If I blast a rap song, my mom will slap the fuck out of me. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. So like realizing that was a very weird process.
Right, because you think about it and you're like, I mean, as a first gen person, right? As a person who's more Americanized, you're like, but we both dark. Like I feel like we like at first I was like, I don't even know my parents could like tell that like that person isn't Nigerian and that person is black. I have ADHD, so I have severe memory problems. So I also don't remember exactly when I realized it, but I know like it was around the time I was in like 4th grade. I wanted to be the house that people came over to. And after we played football, and my parents were just like weirdly against it. And I was like, I didn't understand it. It wasn't until I thought about those moments more in high school, when I was around more white people and my parents were more willing to let them come over my house now, that I was like, that's mad weird. And then it all started kind of connecting because I was like, they were like, oh no, like, you know, their grass is their lawn's too small, like their house is dirty. I'm like, they live 2 houses down. We have the same size lawn. I couldn't understand it. I remember watching sitcoms and being like, my parents have similar politics to the white families on TV than like on the black TV shows. And like, that's all I thought about at the time. I didn't really connect anything, but I still think that's always very funny to be like, you realize that like, oh, okay, all black is not created equal. You know, what we're defining, right, is just intra discrimination, right? It's just like kind of like slicing arbitrary lines in the sand. And I guess it goes back to what we were talking to before, right? About how like, because of the motivations of immigrants coming to this country, in order to win at the system, but I think also to like assuage their own anxieties about like, you know, can I make it here? It's very easy to be like, well, I mean, if everybody else is saying this stuff about this group of people, then like, I guess I'll also join in and say this stuff about this group of people. And then you start looking, then if you're not critically thinking, you look around your state, you look around your province, and you're like, whoa, all the poor people look like this, and all the people that I want to be look like this. So like,
yeah, and it's also very different. The systems of racism are very different in Africa, and a lot of Black Americans and white Americans don't take in that in Africa, kind of the racism is more colorism rather than white and black, because we're all black in Africa. So it's like in Sudan, we have a strong sense of community through appearance because of colonization, where it's like if you're 6 foot tall and you're dark skin, you're Sudanese, you know, it's therefore we treat you as Sudanese. But if you're lighter skinned, if you're from another tribe, if you're a different kind of black, we will treat you differently based on that. And like Americans and Canadian black people are a whole different section of black people, you know. They're not African, you know, they're probably, in my mom's eyes, they're probably like the worst type of black that you can be, you know what I mean? So like, that's why parents kind of treat the other black communities like that, you know?
Right. I realize we didn't really get to name that explicitly yet, that scapegoating of Black Americans is really kind of the engine that pushes us, or pushed me, whether I knew it or not, towards Black excellence, right? Like, I need to be better than I need to be better than Black people, because like I look Black, and I was taught that I don't want to be confused with Stefan down the street. Like I'm Tayo. I'm a, you know, a Nigerian prince. I need to be aspiring to higher. And that now, you know, being at a parent age, I'm like, I couldn't imagine teaching a child that, right? Because like, you're just automatically sort of setting up. I made up my own competition. I'll put it like that. Yeah. Like I was forced to compete with my friends for no other reasons besides the implied assumption that like we would all be fighting for the same positions, that like only a couple of us can get out the hood. And to sort of your point about, you know, the difference between being more radical versus, you know, kind of doing it the corporate way, or like being the good African child. I did take a lot of pride that I'm the only person that made out my neighborhood. Right, I was the only person in my neighborhood to go to a 4-year college. I was the only person that has a full-time job. But like, what does that really do for me? I'm grateful for my paycheck and like the fact that I'm housed and whatever. But like, I feel alienated to what you said before. Like, you know, I've been self-isolating myself for so long, and now a lot of us, now that Blackness, like, and you know, Africans are really guilty of this too, right? Like, we talk about how like, oh, you know, Afropop is taking over the world, and like how do like West Africans feel about that? Which, you know, to be fair, I think a lot more West Africans are okay with it, because we already kind of own a sphere. Like, Nigeria has its own identity, so we're like, we see it more like how Korea sees K-pop, where they're kind of they feel like it's an export.
It's kind of like white perception and black perception, and like how we internalize it as immigrants. Like when we came here in townhouses, the majority of people were like minorities around us naturally because of race disenfranchisement, systems of racism. So they're like, okay, to rise above this, like you said, in my life too, it was also, you have to compete against these people. You know what I mean? Where it's like, my family actually really favored Asian peoples who are like a big minority here, just because of perceptions of race, not even because of character, just because of perceptions of race, because Asian people are like the model minority, hardworking, right. Favored white people specifically too. And like, that's some nuance I missed out on. Yeah, I said it, but I didn't like part too.
Now that Blackness is really in vogue, right? Like, I do see a lot more of my like my former church friends, or like, you know, a lot of my my childhood like West African friends trying to ingratiate themselves with Blackness more than we did when we were kids, right? Especially if you were a person who had more African friends and who had Black friends, it always felt like an either or. Like you would have a couple, but you would never have like equal African friends and Black friends. You either had more Black friends or you had more African friends in my particular community. But now it's more like, okay, everybody's trying to like, now Blackness is kind of it's going to the moon. And the morality or aesthetics of that is another discussion, but I feel like a lot of us are now realizing just how much we missed out on by not by trying to police Blackness or being complicit in the policing of Blackness and trying to like steer away from it, right? Like, because we had all that access, we look the same, we're skin folk, but because of some arbitrary or because of scapegoating, because of demonization, we are like, oh nah, like, you know, them niggas over here, we're here, we're made different. You know, Americans, Black Americans are poor because of X, Y, and Z, and that would never happen to us, even though the same thing happens back home that we're talking about in America.
All right, now it's time for you whites. I love doing this. This is my job. I love it. Let's take Elon Musk's zero to hero story into account, since y'all love to praise him for being in a position of excellence. Elon Musk was born in South Africa. We love representation. True African king. One could even call him a Niger boy. Nubian queen. Slay. Musk is a native of South Africa. In the same way I'm a native to my older sister's room. Shout out to all my sister's lady friends. Y'all helped me develop my riz. You know, Elon Musk was inspired by the apartheid. I just wanted to part her thighs. Who wrote this? Elon Musk was born in 1971. Although I shouldn't say born, because look at him. That doesn't look like a biological being. Just like Dream, he's giving me conjured from a Wattpad's girl's giggly fantasy about the most generic white boy possible. His father was an engineer, and his mother, originally from Canada, was a nutritionist. Something about Canada always being right next to something heinous, but not close enough to point a finger and be like, hey, that was Canada. Just far enough. They're like the dude recording the fight outside of the circle, just like hurling your mom jokes, like just instigating to the max, and then they can just feign ignorance. We love Canadians. As much as we like to champion Elon Musk's zero to hero story, from birth he was put in an advantageous position over the Black population in South Africa. I wish I could call the racial tension there like a yin and yang situation, you know, like a mutual balance type thing, but the situation was very much just slavery, just whips, just... The reality in South Africa is that the majority of its population, people of color, is directly affected by poverty. According to the 2017/2018 report compiled by the South African Human Rights Commission, 64% of Black people, 41% of, I can't really, it feels weird to say, colors, 6% of Indians compared to 1% of white South Africans are living in poverty. But Elon Musk was bullied in school, and the African children around him were bullied by the economic conditions caused by hundreds of years of rigorous oppression, which have caused them to basically have to fight tooth and nail every day just to survive. For Elon Musk, being called a cracker was the height of his turmoil, and it's not a struggle I sympathize with in comparison. Well, Elon Musk was almost beaten. Niggas die every day! Musk then went on to utilize his resources of privilege to work at a Canadian bank, then became an internet entrepreneur, while also attending the University of Pennsylvania. From then, going on to enroll in Stanford University in California. You know how you used to gather around the little electrical generator to meet up with your friends when you were kids? Or how you knew everyone was at someone's house because all the bikes were like at the front of the lawn that they were at? Yeah, Stanford University is like that, but for children and nepotism. You know, they gather around the crochet gates and track each other's movements via the positions of their Maseratis. After this little rich kid side quest, Elon then started a company that landed contracts with both the New York Times and the Chicago Tribune to provide content for their new online sites. Musk was just 24 when he accomplished all of these accolades. I'm 21. When my YouTube check comes in, I'm excited to eat ice cream sandwich. I love ice cream sandwich. He quotes in all his privilege, failure is an option. And no, I haven't ever listened to him talk, but I'm gonna make him talk like that because I think that's how he looks like he would talk. Failure is an option here. If things are not failing, you are not innovating enough. You know how laughable of a quote that is? Let's look at the history of his perceived birthplace. The most impoverished 40% of the country controls less than 8% of the wealth. Furthermore, almost 20% of South Africans survive on less than $1.90 a day. Failure, by definition, wasn't something set up for Elon Musk, or rather, not to the extent that disenfranchised South Africans face. In Black terms, it's like Elon Musk was given the ball to hit a buzzer beater for the win, and the rim was as big as like the Atlantic Ocean. Like you you do. Basically, if you miss it, you're inadequate. Meaning the white population of South Africa's systems of colonialism that were instated nearly 200 years ago have created such an enormous gap between the white and black population that skin tone can be a determiner of class. In the Western world, similarly, systems of disenfranchisement affect us, although to differing degrees. If South Africa's apartheid is like dark coffee, Western oppression is a double-double. 2 milk, 2 sugar. Just the way I like my oppression. Black people in struggling communities are expected to individually leave these struggles with their own power. But even if a black individual is a harder worker than Jeff Bezos, as smart as Elon Musk, or as talented as Queen Elizabeth, that was a joke, smoking Lizzie Packs. But because of historical/social disenfranchisement that still very much affects our day-to-day lives, we don't have the same inherent potential to achieve the same level of perceived excellence as a white person in a relative position of power can. Or it is very, 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 very fucking hard.
So the idea and the concept of like black excellence to me has always been like antagonistic, right? Because I don't know, coming from Seattle, a lot of what is based off of is less about like your skin tone and more about like where you from. So it's like, oh, nigga, you a nigga from the South End, you one of the problem niggas, you know what I mean? It is what it is, light skinned or not. And so like a lot of people who were on the black excellence tip in Seattle were a lot of the same people who helped the white folks gentrify our city, you know what I mean? So for me, like the relationship has been antagonistic. I have some homies that come from that background, and like I only know a little bit based off that, like the brown paper bag test and shit. But it's because my homie, who actually ironically is a blood, his whole family has like upper middle class, but it's weird because they lived in the hood, but they're upper middle class. It's like a lot of the people who lived in the city still like own property. It's kind of interesting because like the dynamic of the city was specific, but like excellence never had this positive ramifications. Like I've never sought out for black excellence, right? In fact, I kind of was the opposite.
I get it, because this whole thing with like my collabs is supposed to be a conversational experience. Conversation differs, which is why it's needed. You know, everyone has their own different experience with black excellence. Yours is just so different from mine. Like I said, I was an immigrant. Came here with my family from a war-torn country, and we were like seeking out this idea of like, oh, there's a better life here. You know what I mean? And if we do X, X, and X, we can achieve that life. And the biggest kind of fuel for that was education. You go through all these programs, you get your bachelor's, you get your master's. You too can leave the poverty you're accustomed to and become something more than what you are. The allure of black excellence came with the Canadian dream. We're probably the biggest melting pot here, not a very big established black community. So like the black people that do make it are in a position of excellence. Even though a lot of black people that come here have property and everything. But me, I'm from a townhouse. Like I'm recording in the middle of a townhouse right now. My house is crumbling from the seams, but like I'm still trying to escape it. But black excellence has always been the allure, because it's like, oh well, I have a way out. I noticed I started going through the system of schooling, even in positions of expected excellence and success, which is a loaded statement for black people, but like in the white perspective of like higher class jobs, higher education, I started to see less and less black people. In my elementary, I was not a token in my elementary at all. There was tons of black people in those schools. There was like probably 4 black people in my class, which is like kind of weird to think about, because I was always the only black person. From that point forward, as I went higher and higher into education, I became like a token of a token of a token of a token, you know? We only see the success stories. Like we see the Jay-Z, we see the Rihanna, we see the Beyonce, we listen to them every day. We react with them every day, but we don't really see the people that kind of fail to achieve that standard of excellence, which in all sense of the word, I kind of did fail to achieve that sense of excellence in a societal sense, because I'm not graduated. I wanted to be a lawyer, but I don't want to do that shit though. It was all white people. I noticed as soon as I like try to get an internship, I was like, wait, not even a single POC person. You know what I mean? So that kind of deterred me too. That's when I really started to not unpack black excellence, but like kind of notice where I'm like, oh, it's really a loaded statement.
I mean, real talk. I mean, that was never like an access I was ever going to have, right? So I didn't have access to the idea of black excellence. In fact, like, it was always like something over there, you know what I mean? Because I don't know. I grew up on Section 8. So I was like, I don't know if you guys you know what Section 8 is?
No, I don't know what Section 8 is.
It's like low income housing, except like instead of being in like one house, they give you a voucher and you can find an apartment under a certain amount of money. and then they'll pay most of your rent. So you're paying like $100 to $180 for rent a month, right? So basically for poor folk. Grew up on clothing banks, food stamps. Not to mention, like my person who I raised me, I say that in quotes, she beat the shit out of me. She didn't really raise me. But was like a white person too. So my grandma was white. And so like there was this weird thing. There was definitely a thing, but people expected me to be more mixed, right? Like I'm mixed. They expect me to behave more mixed. Like I expect mixed motherfuckers to be trying to be around white people. That's not how it was at all. Because like regardless, I still grew up in the hood. Regardless of my white grandmother, I spent more time around my friends' parents. I spent around my grandmother. You know what I mean? So it wasn't really like, it didn't really function like that. And it wasn't even something that was like ever expected I was going to be Black excellence. And it's interesting you say Jay-Z, because I just think of Jay-Z as a sellout, not really the Black excellent type, because like he got his original money off of those.
I'd say everyone in position of Black excellence are sellouts though, because they get so big and get so prominent to this point where their praise is the individual. And then they made it from like zero to hero. Why are you not doing that? You know, that kind of got ingrained in me too. I don't know about you and your experience, because like I didn't really have a lot of symbols of Blackness around me. So like when I looked at media, when I went on my phone, it was all symbols of Black excellence. You know what I mean? So that kind of gave me a full sense of motivation where it's like, I could do that, but then not knowing that that's a 1 in a million story, you know?
I mean, it's kind of a little bit different topic, but how I grew up, like for me, like being a CEO, a tech person, any of these things that you got to go to college for was not realistic. Like, and people talk about the hood, people be like, oh, basketball, it's not realistic. It's more realistic than being a fucking programmer. Like basketball, music, or most likely dope dealing. Like dope dealing or pimping or whatever. Like that was like the options that were open. That's why most motherfuckers become dope dealers, because there's no other option out there, right? So we weren't expected to be Black excellence because we were literally already put into the fuck up category. We were already put into the bad ones. And the only thing that motherfuckers had this weird expectation to me to some degree, but it's only because I'm light skinned with glasses. So they're like, oh, we expect you seem so smart. You're so articulate. You should be doing better. But there's also already kind of a sign to like being the trouble kid. I'm supposed to be the one that comes out of it, right? Didn't meet that expectation to people, but it was never like the Black excellent thing. When I think about Black excellence specifically, I always go back to Cosby. Like I always go back to Cosby every fucking time, because what comes to mind is his response to our own people, right? That's why people were so like fucked up about Cosby being the piece of shit he is because they're like, oh, Black excellence, a lot of people associated with that. But also what I see is like, I see his pound cake speech, right? I see him writing off like women from my community, writing off people like me when we were children. Like what I see is like him like being like, we're the enemy. And that's kind of how like Black excellence has always had that dynamic, specifically with like people, me and people I grew up with. And it was like, we're not a part of that. You know what I mean? Some folks who are more quote unquote articulate, people be like, you could have this if you just work hard enough. My life's hard out here, bro. I'm not going to worry about living up to your expectations. Fuck off. Like nigga, to try to be able to get to being at your level in your mind. You know what I mean? Versus like half the motherfuckers couldn't survive the shit I survived. So I'm like, and I've always kind of like bucked it from the beginning, to be honest with you. I've always been kind of like, nah, I don't like that, because it always felt wrong. You know, it always felt like it was showing off for white people, like minstrelsy. I'm saying that wrong. Like, you know, like a minstrel show. You feel me? It's like, what are we doing? Like, we're trying to like wear the type of suits they wear, dress the way they dress, have the house they have. Why? Like, fuck that. Like, why do we want to do that? It also goes into like, I know you guys mentioned about institutional racism, and it feels like a lot of the people who also were the Black excellence type of the same people who would further institutional racism within the schools, for example. They'd be like the principals that were the Black principal that was hella fucked up. Not saying not all fucked up. I've had some good Black principals, don't get me wrong, but I've also had some ones that were just fucking asses, didn't give no fucks about us, and like see us as a disappointment, really. And so they're like, y'all are the problem with our community type shit. And that's kind of like the energy Black excellence has had for me my whole life.
Like I said, mine was kind of different because I didn't have like the Black community around me. Like I didn't have Black teachers. I didn't have Black people in authoritative positions. There'd be a few Black people scattered here and there. The only Black people that were scattered here are people that were not from my community. So they were like the Nigerian people, the Ghanaian people. Even in the sense of the Black community, we weren't really as connected as like you guys are in the US. It's so much more distinct, the level of community we have here compared to the level of community you guys have there. And how that kind of affected me is like, you know, that myth where it's like Nigerians are super rich.
I guess I don't know.
It's like this African myth, I guess more immigrant myth, where it's like the select group of black people is really rich, and then they become kind of the model minority of blackness. A lot of my friends were like that, where they did come from really good areas, but they were still black, which is something I don't see as much. So like when I saw my friends who in the realms of whiteness like achieved and got to these suburb areas, these middle class areas, you know, and left the townhouses. Like you say you're from Section 8. I swear the equivalent of that here is like townhouses in Canada, where they just scatter them around the city and just give them to immigrants. People that rose above those situations and went to those middle class areas. There was kind of a distinct separation between me and them, where I was like, okay, I got to get to that level that they're at. And then I'd see them going to university and them like excelling in their programs and everything. I had like just so much more limitations towards what I could do because I was impoverished. Yeah, it's just a loaded statement of like, they had more privilege, even though they were black, than I did, even though I was black and impoverished. So I looked at that position of excellence where it's like, okay, it's hope. It's only like now, like in the last like couple years where I was like, there was privileges given to them that probably the same way, like I would look at someone even in a worse position than I am, because I'm actually in a position of pretty good fortune, you know, like I don't have gang violence around me. The worst things that's really around me is like people addicted to drugs in my community. My neighbors got kind of busted for that. Like I remember one time I was 5 years old, just looking inside a window, I saw like my auntie like just whipping up on the pot. That happens a lot here, but we don't have the same problems with like our community than you have. You know what I mean?
I don't know. For me, from my aspect, I do want to say something about like the violence stuff. I think gang violence is like what people don't realize. It's just interpersonal violence, right? It's like whether it's usually over like women or money. Like that's why she go down. Like 90% of the fucking time is those two things. That is going to happen regardless. But one of the things that I feel like a lot of that comes from like fighting for the scraps. One thing that you made me think about the mono minority of blackness type thing, which is kind of specifically how the dynamics with like African immigrants be a lot of times out here. There's a specific like hatred to black people from the US. And I'll say immigrants specifically as immigrants. I'm not talking about refugees. Refugees kind of be more in our boat. Like, you know, people who come as refugees kind of get shit on by everybody similar to black people. But there's definitely that dynamic, at least in Seattle. Let me not speak for everywhere because like, I think one thing I've realized over traveling a lot is that race and the dynamics between races and between us even as like people African diaspora shifts depending on where you are. You know what I mean? But like in Seattle, there's a lot of that, like, you know, minority energy when it came to a lot of African immigrants. It was different with Somalians because there were a lot of refugees and they would like people shit on them just like they shit on us. And then on top of that, a lot of it also goes into like class, right? Like where do you fall in class wise when it came to like Seattle specifically? Because people who had money were seen as a different category. They're the good blacks, right? Quote unquote. I'm just like, from my aspect is when I saw a lot of that, it feels like when it comes to class level, there's a lot of black excellence, but like there was like a lot of also hatred against black folks from like African immigrants, but that was also a different type of energy. It wasn't really black excellence, right? Because like the US fed people that. You'd stay away from them. They're the bad ones. You know what I mean? I'm really hoping for that Foreign National has a conversation about blackness because I feel like there's a lot to break down. And then one of the things that was made really clear in Seattle was like living in that reality, right? Like, for example, like there was legit like gang wars between the Ethiopians and black people. Like shit was going down. Like it was beefing. Like it was for somewhat valid reason. I'm not saying that black people are perfect. Don't get twisted because we do fuck shit too. There was a lot of like anti-black racism from like Ethiopians, for example, that translated into like gang tensions. You know what I mean? Which is hard because it feels like all that is coming from colonialism. All that is coming from like those aspects of America being pushed. I remember specifically one time there was this cat and he was Ethiopian and he was like, "Oh, are you Habashi?" And I was like, "Nah, I'm black." He said, "Oh, so you're a nigger." Like with the hard R. Like, I was like, I'm about to box you, nigga. You got me fucked up, my nigga. Like that type of energy. So motherfuckers, it caused a lot of tension. Now the black excellence thing, it felt like this vibe, and this doesn't go everywhere because I know like Chicago, some motherfuckers feel weird about me saying the word nigga because I'm not like, I don't have two black parents or whatever. I got some motherfuckers that are like, oh, you can't say, I'm like, I'm not here. Like we can fight about it if you want to, but like I'm not here. But then there was also an energy that wouldn't fly in Chicago that we had, which is like a lot of bougie motherfuckers can't run around like, oh my nigga, you ain't from that, shut up. Like, you know, I mean, you ain't from that. And that's that energy because of like also that class tension. Now, one of the things that a lot of people, I'm not saying the kids would do it, but a lot of the parents would do is they'd be like buying and flipping our houses, right? Like a lot of people who run a Black excellence tip would literally buy up properties, you know, rent into us for a while until the property value went up, and then turn around and sell to white people. You know what I mean? And so there was like a lot of that tension, but that never really led to a lot of conflicts a lot of times, besides with like the younger kids who will try to, you know, hang out and pretend like the gangsters, right? Because, you know, ain't nobody trying to go fight some motherfuckers, you know, call the cops on you.
Yeah. From the institutional example, with me, it was purely institutional racism. It was purely my teachers talking to me and be like, oh, you could be better than what you are. You know, my white teachers that were like, ignorant of the negligence surrounding racism and everything. And I was kind of one of the first immigrants they seen in a class that did really well. So then they kind of looked at me. They were like, this dude is really articulate. This dude did X, and X in the third. It's like, it's very weird though, because like over there, you said you got that connotation just based off the color of your skin. More so it was me and the way I acted around in these social circles, because I'm not gonna lie, I was very much a Candace Owens figure when I was in school, you know, because I didn't really know no better. All I knew was to really appease. That was my sense of survival. My sense of survival was being a coon in these spaces because they were predominantly white, so I had to adhere to their standards. And I really noticed this in high school when I was one of 4 people in my graduating class that were Black. And I graduated and I went to uni and my social fabric totally collapsed. I didn't have the same adults around me telling me like, you could do this, this, and this, because university is more of like a you battle, you know, it's like are on your own journey and you kind of dictate your own life from that point forward. So these teachers would guide you to the point of university, these immigrants that didn't really have an understanding of the societal fabric of Canada, institutional racism, and kind of like groom them, I feel, into feeling you can do this too. If you work hard enough, if you achieve, without knowing like that immigrant has to work 30 times harder than that white kid ever had to, just to even get to the same, not even the same level, just to get to the same place, just to get to university, I had to work like 30 times harder than a lot of the white people in my class. That's just because of poverty. That's just because of racism. That's just because a lot of different things, mental health. When I got to uni and I realized like, okay, all these systems are at play, it kind of really discouraged me. I didn't have the best first year in uni. Like I'm a dude that always gets like real good grades. I didn't have the best first semester in uni just because I coped with drugs, alcohol, partying, all of that shit that you kind of see as an adult. And I indulged in that a lot to take away from the pressures of being Black in excellence. Cause like, you know, we didn't have a lot of people that achieved even going to uni, you know, even going to uni was hard as fuck for us. So like just to have me going to uni, all my family members were congratulating me. I became this symbol of like, Liam did it. Now can you do it? You know? And it's like, I didn't really like that. It's to the point where like, I feel guilty, you know, that I didn't like achieve how I should have achieved because the whole of my community was expecting me to achieve in that sense. Like I'm in my second year, not dropped out, but I'm taking my break years. I don't even know if I'm gonna go back, you know? It's just a loaded statement of like, the only reason why I would go back, even if I did go back, was because of communal expectation. I don't even really have interest in completing a degree and going to be a lawyer. So that's kind of my experience with institutional racism, how it's affected like my dynamic and the people around.
You said a couple interesting things that caught my ear. Like you talk about having like kind of some positive Black role models trying to push you and stuff. I don't know, it was kind of wild because with my experience, I got moved a lot because of being on Section 8. So I went from Black neighborhood to white neighborhood to Black neighborhood to white neighborhood, right? The hood to like the suburbs, so it turned into the hood because motherfuckers all running, trying to get away from the hood and end up becoming the hood. You know what I mean? You can't really run from the hood because it follows. But when I was, one of the times when the school was so prominently white, when I moved up to like a place called Fairwood, that was literally the only Black teacher that was like actually supportive that I think about that I ever had. And it was weird because it was like, I think he felt more responsible because we were surrounded by like white people. So he like sat me down and he was the first one that ever told me like, bro, you got to work 3-4 times as hard as these motherfuckers to get the results. You know what I mean? You got to be, you're big and Black. You got to be like extra patient. Otherwise, if you set your boundaries, you're going to end up in jail. And he broke it down to me. Bribe me with the fucking Dr. Dre, the Chronic 2001, to stay out trouble. Because I was getting in a fight with all these white kids and shit, like, you know what I mean? And he was like, just stay out of trouble and I'll get you, you know, whatever CD you want. I was like, I bet, Chronic 2001 and so on. And then, but then when I was like, it's interesting because when I was like in the South End and stuff like that, lot of them teachers that were black were like literally, again, antagonistic. I mean, not to all the black students, but specifically to the ones of us that were like the problem kids, or the kids that were from like the the projects and shit. You know what I mean? They kind of navigated very differently. And one of the things we had in in school was things called timeout rooms. Do you guys have timeout rooms up there?
Nah, we don't have timeout rooms. We just threw kids out the class. We just sit outside the class type.
See, oh yeah, they fucked up when they started suspending me because I realized the trick. Then I was like, oh, I can just go home. So I was like, cuz out teacher, bet. Like I'm going home whenever I don't want to be here. Like we have these things, especially when I was really young, that was called timeout rooms, and it definitely disproportionately got used on us as like black folks, right? But what they do is they lock you in a room, like you can't get out. You know what I mean? And just leave you in there to like kick and punch the walls or whatever the fuck else. And it's like as like a consequence, it's like wow, because then I see
fucked. Like that's kind of like just hearing about that. That's some fucked premise. That's never happened.
Actually, it was like it was really interesting because years later when I became an adult, we were doing organizing against those timeout rooms, like find the school to prison pipeline. And that's another thing too with institutional racism that I noticed specifically is when I was growing up, all the kids I was in school with, all of us, at least the ones that shared my complexion or dark, most of us didn't graduate, but the next time I saw most of them was when I went to prison. So when school to prison pipeline is hella real, like they set it up from like traumatizing us from the timeout rooms, from the way they treat us and interact with us as students. Like I was in the BD classrooms, which is like a behavior-based special ed, which then allowed teachers to do things like put their hands on you sometimes, stuff that they couldn't normally do. Those things just made shit worse. Never made it better. Never made more conflicts happen, a lot less. You know what I mean? Because you got a whole bunch of people dealing with a lot of trauma, a bunch of kids that are hella traumatized, then teachers that can cross boundaries that most teachers can't cross, and you're stuck in this room, and then y'all end up fighting and beefing. Ends up being what happens, especially when people are like going through it, especially when you're like me, who I'm a big, goofy looking, fat black dude, so like in people's eyes. And then also there's the fact of like, I don't know, ADHD and like dyslexia, as well as like, I don't know, a lot of evidence showing that I'm probably autistic as well. So it's like all those things just like were like compounding. I think one of the biggest, like I said, things that I noticed is like when I went to prison, like I saw my whole high school in prison. Like it was literally going and seeing everybody that I had grown up with being booked. It was like a high school reunion, literally. One of the things that is crazy about Seattle, specifically Washington and stuff, is us in Portland have the biggest disproportionate incarceration of black folks, right? The rate of black folks getting incarcerated is the highest in those two states. I know everybody think of the South, because the South will have like 50% like black prisoners, right? But people don't realize is there's a lot more black people in the South. So they might have 50% of the prison being black, but there's less black people out of the population in prison, if that makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. So in Seattle and like in Portland and the Oregon and Washington area, we have the highest amounts. Like it was disproportionate. Like we're not 50% of the prison population, but it's because we're not nowhere close to 50% of the population, period. But the part of our population that is in prison is super high compared to the rest of the nation. It's a clear setup, right? It's like set up to do that from school all the way until you're in prison. Not to mention, we talk about the judges and how the judges will, give you more time, how you're more likely to get arrested and hemmed up by the police. And I don't know too many people that I grew up with that hadn't got their ass whipped by the police multiple times. And we've definitely been arrested a lot. And a lot of us were arrested since we were like 13 and 14 years old. So they started us off young and make sure that we are going to be able to be enslaved later as adults. And so that's like a lot of how I associate systemic racism is based off of those experiences,
Like there's things that you talked about that I couldn't even like, I guess at this point, I don't even know what to ask, because our experiences are so different. Like you said that one thing about the room where they kept kids, they just locked the doors on them, they never did that with us. Even though there was definitely teacher bias and there was racism, it never got to that point. There's a lot of things like I couldn't even fathom. So like I appreciate you so much for like coming on here and talking to me and everything.
I feel privileged to be invited to talk. I'm glad to be able to like build with you. I look forward to you hopping on this Sex Sunday in a couple of weeks when we get all lined up with hopefully all four of us will be up on there going hard. Yeah, me, you, FD, and Foreign Hope, the power stream right there. We're gonna be going hard.
Black excellence leads to disastrous effects when it can't be attained. However, because of capitalism, the Benjamins on our dollars sing, get money or die trying. Like we said, these same pressures are forced and inflicted in black communities as the norm, both from outside and internal pressures. It's like we feel that the trauma of our experiences will strengthen our resolve and help us in the long run, like some very demented version of tough love. When in reality, trauma traumatizes. It creates unparalleled effects that follow us on a daily basis. But yet we tell ourselves, dreams, despite all the downfalls we face. We have to achieve. We have to be more than what we are. But what does that entail for people that don't reach the standard of excellence? Don't get me wrong, because of oppression, black people have to work 10 times harder just to have the same level of opportunity that a white person has. But what happens to the people that work 2 times as hard, 5 times as hard, maybe 8 times as hard, yet couldn't do enough to leave the hood? Are we still gonna look down on them and socially degrade them as people that we don't want to end up like? Because compared to the norm, their whole life, they went above and beyond. But because of being born a disenfranchised person of color, in the sphere of the black community, they're viewed as nothing more than inadequate.
A lot of it has to do with the fact that capitalism is so ingrained in our perception of the way that the world works. We are taught from the time that we're young, whether you're native born or if you're immigrant, that there's a certain formula that you follow. This formula, pull yourself up by your bootstrap. I'm a very late millennial. I was born in 91. So I'm like right at the tail end of it. When I was in college, that was when the whole Occupy Wall Street thing happened. So I feel like it sort of clicked like, okay, something's not right here. A big part of that was Obama came into office and the whole thing was change, hope, hope, hope. And none of that happened for us. So I think it was everything just hitting the fan then. It's like y'all been telling us for the past 30 years that this is the formula that you follow. But we sort of started to see something's not right here because we're following the formula. That's how I was raised and I was taught was, if you go to college, as long as you get your bachelor's, then you're good, you're set, you're straight. But then you have people like my sister, for example, was a little bit older than me. She got her degree. She struggled to get a job straight out of college. I got my degree and I did get a job straight out of school, but then I was unemployed for like 10 months. It's like, okay, y'all said, oh, well, you go to school, you get student loan debt. That's good debt. That's what they always told us was that that's good debt. A lot of us, we're at a point now where it's not really paying off. And I think we started to see that 10 years ago. Y'all telling us one thing, but we see a completely other thing. And I also feel like that's a big reason why it seems like for the first time that a lot of people are starting to at least be open to the idea of other avenues that aren't capitalism because it's not working for a lot of us.
And it's funny how you pointed out the thing between like you and your sister. Me and my sister were actually like polar opposites. You know what I mean? My sister very much fed into the idea of black excellence because like you said, following the blueprint. And she did. Shout out to her though, because following the blueprint actually worked for her. She graduated, she got her degree, and she has a job now. She was always a symbol of excellence that I was trying to achieve, but never could at her level.
Right.
Because just like I didn't really like college the same way she did. Wasn't really infatuated in my studies the same way she did. In reality, I'm reading more than I ever had. Like when I'm doing content creation, I'm learning more than I ever had when I'm doing content creation. In terms of me and my sister's dynamic, I think it really highlights, well, black excellence made a divide, like a fissure between me and my sister. Because whenever I talk to her about my content creation stuff, she's always like, okay. And then she adds in that slight like, okay, but are you doing school? Are you doing a job on the side? Are you doing X and X? So like it kind of fed into, because she's seen the struggle like we've been through, so I have sympathy for her. Going through that lifted her out of it. So now this is her perceived perception of like everyone has to go through this in order to get out of the experience they're in, when in reality, like when I talk about my family specifically, we're so much more fortunate in the realms of just being disenfranchised. There's levels to it, you know what I mean? We're just like in a poverty stricken neighborhood, not in terms of class, but in terms of disenfranchisement. We have like so much more privileges. So that's how like she kind of navigated around, and she kind of tried to instill that on me. Like I said, that caused a fissure in us, and I see that happen in a lot of black families, and I see that destroy a lot.
Most definitely. Well, I guess they call it a hustle culture now. That's always been the thing, is you're doing X, but because you know how they say, all right, make your hobby fund your hobby. That whole mindset. Like if you're doing something and you can't monetize it, then it's of no value. And a lot of that, I think, goes back to being in that environment. People don't realize leisure is a luxury, man. When I was growing up, in a lot of the same ways, I mean, we had like carjackings and drug deals and all that kind of stuff. And I've said this in the past, we ain't really had how people understand gangs and popular culture. We ain't really had it where I was from until like the early to mid 2000s. But we had, property crime, right? Being in, I don't know if you call it poor or working class, lower working class, whatever you call it. We ain't take vacations. When I went on vacation vacation, it was with my grandparents. We ain't go on our first family vacation until I was in college. Actually, I think I was like 19. And a big part of that is because all the income that's coming in has to go right back out. And people feel like, I guess because of that historical oppression of Black folks, we always got to do that much more. That's a whole other thing. But you already know what I'm talking about. All of the baggage that comes with being Black in America. Basically, you playing from behind constantly. You don't really got time to just chill and to just think of, all right, well, what is you doing? You're wasting time. If what you're doing is not making money for you, and that feeds into that whole, Black excellence idea that if what you're doing is not making no money for you, then somehow you're less than. Or if it's not making the kind of money that folk think that you should be making, then somehow you're underachieving. That was a mentality that I'm still in the process of trying to break, because the part that people don't take into consideration is that you got to have money to make money. There's only a handful of Oprahs in the world. There's only a handful of Colin Powell, handful of folk that come from nothing, just straight dirt poor, just starting straight from the ground up. And we always elevate those stories and say, all right, that's who you trying to be like. It's so many things that got to go your way completely outside of your control for you to start from nothing and it becomes something. Black people are the only demographic, as it stands right now, economically speaking, that have a better chance of regressing financially. Instead of, all right, I grew up working class, I worked my way up to middle class. You have a better chance of going backward than forward. And again, that's because of all that baggage that comes with being Black, on top of just the state of where we are economically now with all of this debt that everybody is accruing. That's a big part of it, I feel like, is that folk got to take into consideration that it's just so many different variables that make the idea of Black excellence unrealistic for a lot of people, honestly, if we're going to keep it above.
When you talked about a community, specifically how Black people have more of a chance to regress than go forward, I see like Black excellence more of like a survival tactic for a lot of people, chance of escape. Like you see all the friends like you grew up around having hoop dreams, like you said, it's the hustle culture of it, and it creates like a unreal fantasy for a lot of us, when the reality is like how that kind of survival tactic has affected me and like my worldview. I've only really saw that as like my only way, you know what I mean? Like it's kind of hard to put that feeling into words, like when your adults are telling you like this is the only way you can go forward. Full disclosure, I lived in like a mostly white community. There wasn't that much Black people that like could give me advice and things, so this was all white people giving me advice. So like when I'm told every day like you just got to go to school, you just got to get good marks, you got to do X and X, and I'm doing that, but the whole time there's still the class issue in the background, where my friend's 16, they get a car immediately from their parents and
right.
Yeah, the minute I turned 12, my mom was like, okay, you're working and I'm not paying shit for you anymore. So I had to get a job at 15. I had to work so much more than these people, and I didn't even like gain as much because I still don't have like I still haven't bought my first car, so I haven't done so much. But all the clothes that I bought are mine. All the laptop that I have, this mic, this phone, everything I've bought was like from my own volition, whereas like a lot of people can't really say that, so it's like it's a different perception that people don't get. Black excellence is also in tandem a class issue. Even when people look at me, my family members look at me, they're always like, yeah, you're one of the lucky ones, you had a chance to go to university, you had a chance to do X and X, but they don't consider like the privileges that other kids had, just because we're immigrants and they don't know. I'm not really of a place to like sit them down and decolonize their whole trains of thought. So like it will always be there, and I don't know how to like rationalize that to family members. So it's like this pit of just like Black excellence becomes insecurity. It becomes compartmentalization, where it's like, okay, now I have to big up myself.
So I like to cook, right? That's something I do that is therapeutic. Cooking is therapeutic for me when I don't gotta do it. Always is. oh well, why you ain't start a business? Why you don't, why you don't sell? And I'm like, nigga, do you know how much startup I need for that? I need, sternos, I need transportation, because I ain't gonna be driving that stuff in my car. So if I need, this, that, and the third, and X and Y and Z and all this kind of stuff. But it's always a matter of that whole deal with when Jay-Z had a fit about them talking about eat the rich or whatever. People have this, and this is a big part of decolonization, like you was talking about, is that the cornerstone of this Black excellence mentality is Black entrepreneurship. This is how we get out of poverty. Everybody just start a business. Everybody sells something. I'll tell you this story. When I was, how old was I? I was in middle school. So I couldn't have been no. I was like 12 or 13, and I was riding the train an hour away from New York, where I grew up at. So I would ride the train up to New York on the weekend to the wholesale district on Canal Street and all of that. I would buy up a bunch of, well, first I started out with Pokemon cards. I would sell Pokemon cards to the white kids in my school. That start up.
Flipping that Charizard for like $300, dog.
Yeah. Most definitely. And the thing about it, that half of them was fake. But that's that hustle code that was instilled in me at a young age. Was like, you gotta hustle, you gotta do this, you gotta bada. But I'll take that money, go up to New York, buy a bunch of fake Louis bags, fake Jacobs, Burberry, Gucci, Prada, all that stuff. This was back when the Jacob watches were real popular. And I would come back down to Jersey. I ain't really hit up the barbershops like that because they already knew what the game was. But at school, man, listen, I tell you, I was racking up. Around this time, a family member of mine had broke into our house. They was high, stole my PlayStation, right? So I said, all right. I went, made my money, bought myself a new one. Listen, and the funny thing is that it's folk that don't even got nothing they sell. Always got the advice that say, why don't you start a business? Nigga, why you ain't start a business? Yeah. Why you what? I softened up my stance on that a little bit, getting mad at people about that. And I realized that they just been indoctrinated with that. To escaping poverty is everybody just start a business. Oh, Black America has $1 trillion worth of spending power. That all of that. All of those stats and whatever and whatnot, it's all BS. There's context to it that don't ever get mentioned, don't ever get brought up. What people don't talk about that stat is that the majority of that goes toward bills, keeping your lights on, stuff you already. So the majority of that $1 trillion is already gone. So that's a BS stat. But the reason why you hear that get brought up, on Black radio, on BET all the time, is because we're indoctrinated with that. We're indoctrinated with that idea that all we got to do is follow the formula. That's the problem. The problem is that not enough of us rather are following the formula. Again, I got stories for days, of selling it. I sold basically everything except drugs. You feel me? Because that was the idea that I was ingrained with, was that I can sell my way out of poverty, but obviously that ain't work that way.
Like you said, we don't have the same community support system than like other people do. Like most of the time, right. Just generally speaking.
I don't mean to cut you off, but this is another thing I just thought of this. I had read this article, right, that was talking about first-time home buyers and whatever. Like they just said it so casually, is ask for a gift from family, a couple racks here, this, and like, who do I know that just got a couple racks like that to give me some like I don't know. Everybody I know is struggling. So that just goes to show you just how false that narrative is. You gotta have support. Entrepreneur, whatever, you got to have a support system behind you that you're able to do that. And when you don't have that, the follow-up that you don't have the ingredients. That's what Black excellence boils down to me. You got some folk that got the ingredients. All right, they put the ingredients together. They made their cake, and they saying, all right, all you gotta do is make this cake yourself. But I ain't got no egg. I ain't got no flour. Oh well. So
yeah, that's fucking crazy. Get a couple racks, you can lend a house. That's kind of insane. We've actually been renting like this since the beginning. We've always been in townhousing. It's so jarring that like even if you call it like lower middle class, when I go to like a lower middle class house, I'm like, shit, y'all eat 3 meals a day? like sitting with family?
Right.
That's crazy.
Right.
That's crazy. There's a car in the front. There's like y'all call this poor? I'm like,
Right.
okay. I'm like, okay, there's something there's like a discrepancy, like you can't even like talk about. More specifically in my position though, like when you're just surrounded with white people, there's not a lot of things you could relate to in terms of poverty and like disenfranchisement, which is why I'm trying to move too. But yeah, I fucking hate it here. I hate the systems of excellence here. But also when you talked about community and like uplifting each other, that's something, the decolonization of thought is something that we have to go through, like the whole Black community as a whole, like whether you're in upper class or lower class, there's a whole decolonization of thought pertaining to this. Is also entrenched in capitalism. Working harder will not give you more, you know. Being in systems of power will give you more. This even has roots in like the content creation that we do, you know what I mean? Which is why I like love the Black community on YouTube, and I love how like Uncle Fix operating, like Foreign's operating, like all those, the Black men and women around us who are like shouting us out. We're all like helping each other.
Oh
like,
yeah. It's beautiful, man.
And I think it's like community above all, if anything.
If only we could get that in the real world, then you couldn't tell us nothing. But it's too many niggas still trying to be Jay-Z. That's the problem. It ain't enough Fred Hamptons. It's too many J's.
Act 4. Empathy. Should we dream? Have you given up on the idea of Black?
Unfortunately, no. I still want to be rich. I still want money. It's dialectics, right? Like in one hand, I can hold that capitalism forces me to aspire to ends that are harmful towards me. In order for me to be good at both my job or even at this thing that I want to make my job, right? Making videos, I have to think in a way that asks me to commodify myself and other people to my own end. But at the same time, I think there's plenty of like empathy to be had towards wanting to do what you do very well and wanting to support people that look like you that do what they do really well. Like at the end of the day, I think going back to Du Bois, like the Talented 10 idea is simply about trying to build a base of people that are skilled and that therefore can, you know, basically fight for the people that need to catch up. Right. It's the reason why LeBron James started the charter school, even though the charter school itself is a dubious idea. He's like, okay, when he went to school at St. Mary's with white people, he was like, it wasn't the best experience being the token Black basketball star. Let's get people around themselves. I don't know if you ever watched that podcast, not watch that podcast, listen to that podcast, Nice White Parents, that was talking about basically his whole theory is that, or his whole thesis is that integration might have been a mistake, and we also never really got to its end goal. But it all comes down to Black excellence. I think it is most positive is looking for the lights in our own community and saying like, okay, no, like we no longer want to look towards Jennifer Aniston and George Clooney. We have our Denzel.
Now I understand there's nuances in the depiction of Black culture as a whole, class nuances specifically. So when I break down these thought processes, use me as a mirror for introspective thought into your own life. It's me and you having a conversation, okay? For example, I'm speaking for a lot of disenfranchised Black people when I voice my concerns with the issue of Black excellence, because I myself am a disenfranchised Black person, meaning this idea works in conjunction with not only race, but class. I understand there's a big Black middle class community in places like Atlanta, California, Texas, New York, comprised of Black people who've actually achieved this idea of capitalistic excellence within their communities, and maybe even some of you guys who were born in the suburbs or maybe even upper middle class areas. And in turn, you've internalized Black excellence differently than I have, because maybe y'all have seen the work that your parents and communal members have done to leave systems of poverty that they were once accustomed to. And I actually have empathy for that. I'm not romanticizing the beauty in the struggle. Despite what J. Cole tells you, there's no beauty in poverty. But the fact remains that even in these few communities of Black excellence, there's hundreds of more still suffering in poverty. Trust me, I've been impoverished my whole life. If I could leave my immediate surroundings of poverty and head elsewhere, I would take the chance in a blink of an eye. Poverty is not something I really adore to be a part of, to be frank. But listen to my spiel, because I do have a point to make at the end, like I promise. When I was a wee lad, when I was a little boy, I lived in this neighborhood in the north side of Edmonton with like all of my cousins. And It was government housing, so it was still under the poverty line. But it was one of the most impactful experiences of my life. We were all refugees. We all had similar stories, similar upbringing, similar cultural backgrounds. You could call it a trauma bond maybe, but the community we formed in that neighborhood was very healing. The combined experience of being around people who look like you, go through the same struggles, the same systems of oppression, speak the same language, and are also black is something that I can't put into words. Sorry, kidology, but the experience felt in a black community isn't tribalism in the same degree it is in white communities. It transcends that. When marginalized groups form these mini societies and actually help each other, there's a self-determination factor removed from racial hierarchies that feels so free. And I know my white audience might not feel this as much, but as a black person, what's more satisfying than not having to restrict your music taste because of outside bigoted opinions, using AAE freely, being understood and actually vibing, having a safe space to be viewed as an individual rather than the tokenized facade of blackness. It's catharsis that I get excited just talking about. But we still dream to leave these communities. Yes, these areas are not the best to befriend. Now, imagine leaving that neighborhood by studying strenuously every day in a school that couldn't care less if you graduated or not. Or maybe finally affording a house, working abysmal hours in a job that's only promoted you once in the 10 years you were working there. Or maybe earning a scholarship through sports or your own academic prowess that gets you into university. Then finally leaving this community, only to get out of there and realize that you're alone. There's no more refuge towards racial biases, or no community to remind you that your struggles are not being faced alone. You're just alone. But not just the feeling of being alone, but also the act of being visibly alone. I still want excellence in the form of financial independence, because I haven't had that my whole life. But I also don't know what that feels like, because I haven't had that my whole entire life. It would be nice to support my family, pay for my sister's tuition, get a car, move to somewhere predominantly black, and be happy with like a cool little girl or something. Make it happen, God. But I've also never had any of that. So this is all just dreams and aspirations. I know in reality, capitalism distorts my dreams, takes advantage of my oppression, and turns it into something cynical. Yet I still dream, because honestly, the crushing experience of poverty is just something I never see myself living and enjoying. So selfishly, I want to be excellent. Not in the way Jay-Z is, not in the way Kobe is, not in the way Rihanna is. Because no, I don't want to be a figure of excellence for you guys to aspire to be. That's never been the point of me or my channel. I envision my excellence by example, being a healthy portrayal of black masculinity. But I never want that example to extend to a financial sense. Yes, I do want to make YouTube a job, but it would be misleading for me to tell you guys to start a YouTube channel so you could be in the same financial position that I'm in. I'm very lucky. I found Fick, I found Foreign, I found Noah, I found Roe, I found Think Peace Tribe, I found Fab Socialism, I found Shanspear, Haryana, Zai, Frankie, like Color Mind J, Villainous. You see what I mean? I'm in a position of excellence because I have so many prominent YouTubers around me, along with a really cool audience who've given me a sense of community and support, which have made my dreams come to fruition. I didn't do this by myself, and Lord knows how many countless days of editing it even took to make to the 16K level, which still isn't enough for financial stability, but like we're getting there. I want you guys to dream and be whatever you want, do whatever you want, but understand that black excellence is a loaded term. Don't idolize the individuals, and don't forget your community. Don't forget that you're black or a POC, or I can't say this to the white people. Don't forget that you're white at the end of the day. That'd be so weird. But also don't forget that personal excellence is a facade. Your community is what makes you, you. But what do I know? I'm just a pink-haired dude that calls himself Turb that sings his stuffies to sleep. My favorite pastime is polygamy and home wrecking. I never said I was a good guy. Don't let me into the Try Guys. I'm gonna commit polygamy. I'm gonna be polygamy. I'm a polygamy. Tell me your thoughts and opinions. Vent about your frustrations in the comments. Let's have healthy conversations. Support my Patreon. We hit $100 last month. We're heading to 200. Every subscription helps me create content faster and faster and better by equipping me with ice cream sandwiches, because that's what I work on. I work off ice cream sandwiches. So every Patreon subscriber gets me an ice cream sandwich, and video is 1 day quicker. See you next time. Peace. Hopefully I don't take so long for the next video. This one took like 2 months. Holy fuck. Thank you guys for waiting and shit. Goddamn.